This is the new Zara Absolutely Dark Intense that I recently bought. The previous Absolutely Dark has some similarities to Parfums de Marly Percival, which is a fragrance I absolutely love. So it will be very interesting to see if the new Intense is better than the original Absolutely Dark. So this is my first impressions of the new Absolutely Dark Intense, and I will compare it to the original Absolutely Dark throughout the video. So let's quickly recap what the original Absolutely Dark smells like. So I concluded my thoughts on the original back in 2023 by saying that it's a versatile, easy to wear kind of scent that smells really good. To me, it's basically a mix of freshness and woodiness with a bit of sweetness. Absolutely Dark could almost be described as a less sort of a nuanced and less intensely fresh version of Parfums de Marly Percival that's a bit more sort of a flat. I'm gonna link to my video with my thoughts on Absolutely Dark somewhere here above and in the description below. So let's start with the bottle, and as you can see, the new Intense definitely looks better than the original, but overall the same kind of bottle. So I paid about 25 for Absolutely Dark Intense for 100 ml of this, and I believe I paid slightly less for my bottle of the OG Absolutely Dark. So according to the box, we have mandarin, lavender, ginger, cardamom, orris, everlasting flower, sandalwood, maple syrup, accord, dry amber, tonka bean, walnut, and musk. So let's see what Absolutely Dark Intense smells like. This is like a mix of slightly sort of a nuanced kind of freshness. It's also softly powdery in the opening, and it definitely has a bit of sweetness in the opening. So to compare, I'm gonna spray on the OG on my right hand. Okay, there's definitely quite a bit of difference here. I do feel the OG Absolutely Dark has a bit more freshness and brightness to it in the opening. It definitely doesn't have the same kind of sweetness like Absolutely Dark Intense has, and I also don't feel it has the same kind of sort of a soft powderness in the opening like Intense has. The OG Absolutely Dark definitely goes in a more fresh way, whereas I do feel Absolutely Dark goes in a slightly warmer and definitely more sweet direction. Absolutely Dark is the one that goes in a sort of a Percival-ish kind of direction, whereas I do feel this goes in a very different direction. So these two definitely have more in common than this and this. And to my nose, what really stands out about the opening of Absolutely Dark Intense is the lavender. So this has a bit of lavender that is sort of softly fresh. It's gotta be the maple syrup accord that gives it the sweetness that it has in the opening, and it definitely has a sort of a nutty kind of feel to it. That sweetness and sort of a nuttiness definitely does not exist in Absolutely Dark, which I feel focuses more on a mix of freshness. And that sweetness just keeps on growing in intensity as Absolutely Dark Intense heads into the mids, almost sort of a sugary sweet with a bit of nuttiness to it. You can still feel the lavender in here, giving it a bit of aromatic freshness, but I do feel it's already a lot softer. The soft powderness that I picked up on in the opening feels slightly stronger in the mids, and I'm starting to pick up on a bit of woodiness. So the heart of it, at least to me, and at least based on these first impressions, is basically a mix of a bit of aromatic freshness, soft aromatic freshness. You definitely have a bit of sweetness to it, like a sugary kind of sweetness. It's also a bit nutty. It's also softly powdery and softly woody. And it definitely has a sort of a warmer feel to it at the heart of it. Comparing the mids of these, I do feel that the heart of Absolutely Dark is sort of like an extension of the opening. So this is basically a mix of different kinds of freshness. It's a bit spicy, but at the heart of it, the original Absolutely Dark is a bit more woody. So it's basically a mix of freshness and woodiness at the heart of it. Intense is definitely a bit warmer, deeper, and richer, whereas I do feel Absolutely Dark is a bit lighter and fresher. And whereas I feel the original Absolutely Dark has the sort of a DNA like Percival, Fierce, or Mont Blanc Legend, I can't figure out what this sort of reminds me of. This feels familiar in a nice way though. The lavender is still there in the drawdown, even though I do feel that part, the aromatic part of Absolutely Dark Intense, is quite soft in the drawdown. It still has that sweetness to it. I'm picking up on something sort of softly vanilla-ish in the drawdown as well. It's definitely a bit ambery in the drawdown and softly woody. And comparing the drawdown of these two, I do feel that Absolutely Dark is still a sort of extension of the opening and the mids. So Absolutely Dark in the drawdown product to me is basically a mix of freshness and woodiness, and it's softly powdery. There's a bit more to it, but essentially Absolutely Dark is that. So while there are some similarities, I actually feel these two go in quite different directions. So Absolutely Dark Intense is basically the warmer, sweeter, and deeper and richer version of Absolutely Dark. And I believe we saw the same sort of a thing with Sand Desert at Sunset, the Intense version, and Sunrise on the Red Sand Dunes Intense as well, with the Intense versions being a bit sort of a deeper, richer, and warmer. So I could be wrong, but it does seem that the sort of intense versions go in sort of that direction. So besides that they are different scent-wise, I actually feel that Absolutely Dark Intense feels more sort of a well-made. I mean, I really like Absolutely Dark the OG, which basically gives me a bit of Parfums de Marly vibes, but when comparing it to the Intense, it definitely feels a bit more sort of flat, whereas I do feel Absolutely Dark Intense feels more, has more nuances and layers to it, and definitely feels more well-made. But again, keep in mind that Absolutely Dark Intense is a fragrance with more depth, warmth, and richness to it. This is basically a fresh and woody scent. So when it comes to the vibe of Absolutely Dark Intense, I do feel this has a more of a sort of a sexy and elegant vibe to it if you compare it to the original. The OG is more sort of a casual, fresh, whereas I do feel this goes in a more sort of a darker, mysterious, and sexier direction. I'm gonna get to usage in a short while, but basically Absolutely Dark when you're going to the gym or on super warm days, Absolutely Dark Intense for date nights. When it comes to performance, I really feel I gotta wear Absolutely Dark Intense more. However, based on how it sort of lingers in the air around me and how it oozes from my skin, I feel this is a bit above average, but I don't feel this is something that is strong. But I could be wrong, and I'm gonna update you in a future video or in the comments of this video. So a quick one on compliments and mass appeal. Absolutely Dark Intense is absolutely a compliment getting kind of scent. I don't think there's anything in Absolutely Dark that is going to be offensive to anyone. I don't think there's anything that sort of stands out in a nasty way. This is basically something that a lot of people will enjoy getting away from. When it comes to usage, so like seasons and occasions, even though Absolutely Dark Intense has more layers and depth to it compared to the original, I don't feel this is something that is overly deep, overly heavy, overly intense, or overly sweet. So this, at least to me, is something that is primarily for spring, summer nights, fall and winter. But with that said, the original Absolutely Dark is definitely the one I feel is more of a sort of an everyday kind of fragrance that works throughout the year. I mean, it's basically fresh and woody. So who's Absolutely Dark Intense for? I do feel that if you're someone who usually enjoys fragrances with an aromatic side, so lavender, if you usually enjoy a bit of sweetness in your fragrances, a bit of powderiness and a bit of woodiness, then you'll most likely enjoy this one. The scent profile overall is quite a likable one. If you don't like a bit of sweetness, then stay away. I'm definitely 100% not saying they are the same, but I do feel that if you enjoy fragrances like Jean Paul Gaultier's Scanner Pour Homme, Le Parfum, and YSL La Nuit de l'Homme, that's sort of a kind of scent that has a bit of sort of aromatic freshness to it, a bit of spiciness to it, a bit of sweetness to them, and a bit of woodiness, then you most likely enjoy this. So what are some of the alternatives to Absolutely Dark Intense? So I still, unfortunately, don't know what it reminds me of. This definitely reminds me of something, but I don't know what it is. Absolutely Dark Intense feels like it's a mix of different fragrances, but here are 3 alternatives that I think smell great. They are definitely not the same though. So pretty much everyone knows about YSL La Nuit de l'Homme. This is basically aromatic, spicy and woody with a bit of sweetness. You got cardamom pushing through for a bit of spiciness and a fantastic dose of lavender. Scanner Le Parfum is basically a mix of a super creamy dose of sandalwood, a bit of sweet warm vanilla with an aromatic touch. So it's aromatic, woody and vanillic. These two definitely not the same, but Scanner Le Parfum smells great. 1 Million Royal blends a gorgeous aromatic heart with a spicy opening on a fantastic woody base. You basically have lavender and cardamom pushing through on a woody base with a gorgeous dose of sweetness. These two are definitely not the same, but I do think 1 Million Royal is a great scent. So what are my final thoughts on Zara Absolutely Dark Intense based on my first impressions of it? I was actually quite surprised on how different it is. So as the OG is basically sort of in a way like Parfums de Marly Percival, but to me a bit sort of less intensely fresh and a bit more flat. This is something else. It's warmer, sweeter, more ambery, it's got a soft kind of woodiness to it, and something sort of nutty about it. And finally, the name sort of makes sense because of the name. Absolutely Dark on the OG definitely did not make any sense at all, because this is basically a fresh and woody scent. I'm not gonna say this is absolutely dark. This is absolutely darker though than the OG. And choosing between these two is in a way a bit tough because they are different kinds of scents. This is basically a Percival inspired fresh scent, and Percival is one of my phrases for life, but I do feel this is not as good as Percival. This goes in a warmer, sort of a richer, deeper, and definitely sweeter and more nuanced and more layered direction. And I do feel Absolutely Dark Intense is more well made. So they are very different, but if I had to choose between the two, I'm probably going to go with Absolutely Dark Intense. To me, it just feels more well made, and this one I definitely like. So I would absolutely love to know how you feel about the Zara Absolutely Dark Intense. Do you feel this is a good one? Do you feel it's a bad one? And I would love to know if Absolutely Dark Intense reminds you of some other fragrance. If so, which? Drop a like on this video and subscribe for more. Make sure you check out my other Zara videos over there, and I'll see you in the next one.